Man, I'll tell you guys, there are some things that are just a legitimate sigh of relief. Like sitting down to watch a sequel to a movie that's really awesome and the sequel actually ends up being kind of comparable to the original. It's just such a relieving feeling, you know? I mean, to be completely honest, there's a lot more real world, real life things that are far more relieving and far more important, but the real world's kind of scary right now, guys, so I'm just gonna stick with the movie world and that's the way it is. So there you go. Cue the music. What's up, guys? How's it going? How's everybody doing today? Welcome back to the channel. Sorry, my hair is probably going to be acting up, but I mean, yeah, you win some, you lose some, you know? And very recently, I did a review for the movie 28 Days Later, so inevitably, of course, we're going to talk about 28 Weeks Later, and I'm kind of glad that I am. Because oftentimes what will happen, and not just with horror movies, by the way, is that a studio will take a movie that made a bunch of money, and they're just like, oh, hey, why don't we just paint a couple things differently? Just poop that out there and maybe everybody will go see it and it'll make the same amount of money, right? But luckily for me, this movie actually took the franchise, ran with it, and went a completely different direction, but still kind of stayed true to the original, and it's really kind of nice to watch. And as for the plot of this movie, 28 Days Later is actually kind of an old movie and kind of outside the consciousness, so I'll try and be vague and not ruin that movie, but it might come with the territory, so sorry. But the franchise in general, it revolves around this rage virus that is essentially, it's all about running zombies, basically. And there's no main character per se, but this movie mostly centers around a family and they chronicle them kind of at the peak of when the rage virus was going at its worst. But now there's also a quarantined kind of safe zone. It also follows them when they're in that kind of perspective also. But the interesting thing is that this movie isn't really a direct sequel because there's no characters from the first movie in it, so it just kind of takes place in the same universe by happenstance. So basically, if you haven't seen the first one, you can still watch this one and really enjoy it. And I don't know about you, but I personally really quite enjoyed it. But one of the most noticeable things about this movie is actually the cast, because if you look at the budget for this movie and all the people that are in it, I don't know if you actually would have been able to make this movie today. But since this movie's a little bit older, we have the gift of hindsight, so it's actually really interesting to watch this cast kind of like commingling with each other. And some of the lesser knowns, there's Harold Perrineau, and you might know him from Lost, and he was in some of the Matrix sequels, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff. And then there's Robert Carlyle, he's a very well-known Scottish actor, and if you go down his IMDb, I guarantee you'll find 10 different things that you've seen him in. And then there's a very young Imogen Poots, and then on top of that there's Rose Byrne, who was in a bunch of the X-Men movies and Bridesmaids and Neighbors and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then of course the icing on the cake, you have Jeremy Renner and Idris Elba playing military guys. So who'da thunk? Back when they cost nothing to hire. And Idris Elba's part wasn't huge, but he was good as usual. Generally speaking though, I would say the acting was pretty good for the vast majority of it. There might have been a couple moments that were iffy, but overall, pretty solid. I did think it was kind of funny how Jeremy Renner was playing a sniper in the movie because, you know, Hawkeye. But anyway, some of the other positives about the movie are the opening scene. The opening scene is fucking intense. It was slightly predictable, but I thought it was very well crafted overall. And the opening scene for this movie is actually pretty crucial if you think about it, given the structure of the film. Because the opening scene is a really big attention grabby scene, but then from then on, it's a very chill, very slow build up to the third act. Granted, there are some very key moments of narrative tension that happen throughout the movie, but like the ramp up was very consistent in my opinion. And there's a lot of themes that are fairly prevalent throughout the entire movie that I thought were good. Not just the family dynamic that I mentioned earlier, but there's also the idea of guilt and having a conscience and possibly using that conscience that you have to maybe prevent guilt later. And I also think this movie had a lot to say about devotion and what that could possibly mean to certain different people, because that could be interpreted in several different ways, and there's quite a few different cast members to see kind of how that could manifest. The most prevalent one by far though was probably the guilt aspect of it, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And despite the fact that this movie didn't retain really a whole lot of story threads from the first movie, there were a lot of really small subtle hints and homages to the first movie that were really nice touches. So this movie really did do its own thing, but it still paid respects to the original, and I respect that in and of itself. And also, luckily, the third act of this movie is a bunch of fun. Quick disclaimer though, if you've seen the first one and you haven't seen this one is exceptionally more gory than the first one. Like they definitely, you can tell that they had way more of a budget this time around. But yeah, solid third act, and then I thought the ending was really good. Like the last couple shots of the movie was awesome, and it raised just enough questions for you to be like, oh, that was a great movie, but I'm still kind of intrigued. But anyway, overall guys, I have to say, considering the fact that this is only the second time that I've seen this movie and it's been a very long time, I was actually shocked at how good it was. I remember I saw the movie, but I didn't remember loving it this ecstatically though. But as far as the score goes, I think I'm gonna give it somewhere in like the 8.8 to 9.1 range or something like that, because I really had a fun time with this movie. It might not be everybody's cup of tea because it's a horror movie and it's a zombie movie and there's a couple tropey things here and there, but with films of any genre, that's kind of bound to happen, and you can still tell a really compelling story with those kind of parameters. But anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. What are your guys' thoughts? Have you seen this movie? Have you heard of it? When was the last time you saw it? Hop in the comments, let me know what's up. Other than that, if you like this video, give me a like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, do all that other YouTube-y type of shit, and I will catch you guys next time.